Nobody. See, I want this class to be very interactive because as the name suggests, it is going to be an applied subject. So whatever we are going to study in class will have connection with the lab class also. So the theory and the lab, you guys are fortunate enough to do it together. Maybe the next batch may not be so fortunate. So anyone, what is this thermofluids? Why we have combined RSC and IC to be called as applied thermofluid? Nobody. So you would see in the course that refrigeration and air conditioning requires a lot of knowledge on thermodynamics and some portion of the fluid mechanics. And it is a highly applied field of thermodynamics and fluid mechanics. Similarly, IC engine also is one of the major application of thermodynamics as well as fluid mechanics. And the other component which you would study in the next semester is the power plants. Okay, so these three, if you can classify the application of thermodynamics and fluid mechanics together, you would see that these three are the broad classifications. So you can classify most of the systems, the thermal systems that exist, as either systems which are producing refrigeration or heating, or systems which are producing power. Okay, and if they are power producing systems, it could be internal combustion or external combustion systems. Okay, they could be generating electricity or they could be generating some motion. Okay, so they are all applied fields of the subjects that you have already studied in your second year, that is fluid mechanics, thermodynamics, and even third year, the previous semester you have studied heat transfer. So all these things would be used, and you would see all these devices are just an application of these fundamental topics. And hence, the name has been given to this as applied thermofluids. And we have divided the vast curriculum into two parts, 1 and 2. Okay, so I would be dealing with the RAC part, that is a refrigeration conditioning. Yes, someone turned on the mic. Okay. So how many of you have actually seen at least few components of a domestic refrigerator, or actually tried to see what is there on the back side of your refrigerator? Have you actually bothered to look at that?
In the old refrigerator, I saw that it is like a fin which
Very
transport.
good. You still have that old refrigerator?
No, we have exchanged for the new one. Then.
New one. Okay. Okay. So something has vanished now, no, in the new one. That is the as you
The
said correctly,
grid
tube.
structure was is not
Yes.
there.
Yes. 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 So that was a condenser. So actually, the condenser has not vanished. It is now internal to the outside packaging. Anything else? Anyone knows where the compressor is placed?
The bottom of the back.
Bottom of the back side. So why place it at the bottom? This has nothing to do with thermodynamics.
The heavy component, I mean, such.
Heavy component, a lot of vibration.
Yeah.
And what else? What else do you think would be required for a refrigeration cycle or a refrigerator to work?
Sir, coolant.
Coolant. So we will not call it as a coolant. We will call it as a, what is the other name? Anyone?
Refrigerant.
Cool. Refrigerant. Yes. So normally you would see that the AC mechanic or the domestic refrigerator mechanic, they will call it as a coolant, or some just they'll call it as a gas. Okay, so that is actually refrigerant. Good. So uh, refrigerant, initially we used to have whatever naturally occurring chemicals or gases we could find. So that was in older days. And now we have understood how to build our own gases which have suitable properties. So we call them as synthetic refrigerants. So they are all man-made refrigerants, and that is the most common refrigerants that we are right now using. But as many would know, that in order to look into the future, sometimes we'll have to look backwards, and we are actually going back to natural refrigerants because of various issues with the current synthetic ones. So we will discuss this as a part of one of the module in RAC course. So see how the entire refrigerant manufacturing industry has gone a complete cycle. So initially we used natural ones, then we started building synthetic ones, and we were very proud of it. We thought that we have attained uh, uh, we have been able to fabricate chemicals which are giving us very good efficiencies, but then we realized the other effects on the environment, and now we are looking back, going back to the natural refrigerants. Okay, then what else? So two components. Any other component you can see in your refrigerator other than the doors and cabinets? The one that is actually producing cooling, where is that? What is that component? Prakhar, did you ever touch that backside mesh?
No, sir. I have just placed by hand some 1 2 inches.
So,
Like it was
so
some gap
how?
there. Very
So,
hot.
so very hot, very hot. Good. So that is where the coolant, as one of you said, the refrigerant, which is the technical term, is rejecting heat. So somewhere it is absorbing heat. Where is that?
From the cabin.
From the cabin. So is it placed everywhere, all throughout your refrigerator? I'm not just asking Prakhar, but anyone can answer. Is the cooling produced all over the cabinet, or it is placed at a specific location?
Sir, I have seen like one place there was some adjuster type of thing. There was 5 numbers, 1 2 3 4 5,
A knob.
a knob there.
Okay, that is yeah. We will see that later. But where
I
do you actually produce lot of cooling?
Freezer.
Sir, in the freezing zone.
Freezer. So that is where the cooling coil is actually kept. And the other cabinet, nowadays you have two door systems, or even in the older days you had one freezer section, then a chill tray, and then various racks. So though that portion of the cabinet where you put your vegetables and fruits, these region will not have the cooling coil. The cooling coil is primarily placed in your freezer section, and from there we draw air to the other portion of the unit in order to cool it, because the requirement for the freezer section is different and the other region is slightly warmer temperature is enough. So typically your freezer will be somewhere between -25 to -30, and the rest of the portion of the refrigerator could be somewhere between 5 to 10ish. Okay, so of course, if you look at the door side, you would see the temperatures are not that cold. And if you look at slightly in interior region of your cabinet, you will feel it is much cooler. So you will not have a homogeneous temperature setup inside the entire cabinet on the bottom side. Okay, whereas in the freezer section, you will have more or less uniform cooling with the presence of a fan and the unit being much smaller than the other cabinet. So you will have anywhere between -25 to -30. Any idea why such low temperatures are needed. What is the temperature required for your ice cream to be stored properly? वो आइसक्रीम के ऊपर रैपर पे लिखा रहता है. आई एम श्योर दैट नो वन हैज ऑब्जर्व दैट. So it would be written -18 to -20. So your freezer has to be at a temperature much lower than that. So that is the reasons. Of course, people who are storing meat and all, they also have to freeze the meat in order to keep it properly. So this is the typical temperature based on our day-to-day need. Now, is this system and the system which is producing air conditioning, are they two different systems or they are similar systems? Just from your common sense. The AC, the window AC, the split ACs, or the central ACs that you have in a mall or an office space, are they different from your refrigerator, or they are similar systems just working at different temperatures? What do you think? What do you guess? What is your guess?
Sir, I think they are different.
They are different. Okay. Anyone else? So Ayush, you said that they are different.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anyone else who has a contradictory view? No one else has any view?
Sir, I think they are similar.
They are similar. So, Ayan, then if you have said they are similar, then where exactly are we making the change so that in one case it is being used as a refrigerator and the other case it is providing us thermal comfort?
So I mean, like the operating temperatures will be different.
Operating temperatures will be different.
Because
So
we
there
don't-
is some way of controlling the temperature at which the cooling is provided.
Yes, sir.
So primarily you will see the systems are same, exactly same. Okay, so even your ACs should be technically called a refrigeration unit only. Okay, it is just that it is conditioning the air. In fact, even your domestic refrigerator, it is conditioning the air inside the freezer. It is conditioning the air inside the cabinet where you are placing your vegetables or fruits or water or water bottles or butter, everything. So it is just conditioning the air. In one case, you are conditioning the temperatures to sub-zero level, and in another case, you are probably limiting it to 20 degree or 25 degree. Okay, people who have actually seen the malls where you can buy groceries, you will see certain sections they are very cold, where the meat is stored, and they are huge. They could be as huge as your hall or your bedroom. Okay, and you have to enter and buy your meat over there. So that is also an air conditioning unit only. It is just that it is a large freezer or a large refrigerator. Okay, so an air conditioning unit or a deep freezer or a domestic refrigerator, they are all same. They are all using the same cycle, thermodynamic cycle. They are all using the same primary component. It is just that the instrumentation, the control units could be different. And of course, based on the operating temperatures, you can have different size of compressor, different size of heat exchangers, and other things. So the design would be different, but as far as the components go, they are same. It is very similar to your, let's say, your IC engines producing motion, okay, and the diesel generators. Your diesel car and a diesel generator, they are one and the same thing. It is just that in one case you have a gearbox and connected to a drive shaft, okay, and wheel, and in other case you connect your output to a generator and produce electricity. Okay. In fact, the diesel engines that are deployed in the Indian railways, they are in fact diesel generators. You still have the electrical motors, which are being driven by burning diesel, producing electricity, and then running the motors. Okay, it is not equivalent to a diesel car, which directly transfers the torque to the wheel. So a diesel engine, in case of a railway context, is actually a diesel generator. So it does not differ as far as the cycle goes. It does not differ from a diesel car. Okay, it just differs in the auxiliary components which might be attached to it. Similarly, a domestic refrigerator and an air conditioning unit, they are exactly same as far as you look at it from the thermodynamics point of view. So yet we study air conditioning separately from refrigeration, and the reason is just one thing. Is in one case in refrigeration we are looking or focusing only on the refrigerant components. You have a compressor, you have a condenser, you have a evaporator, you have an expansion valve. So we are looking at whatever is flowing inside the tubes. And in the air conditioners, we know what is there in the refrigeration side, and we will now focus on the air side. And why we are focusing on the air side and why we need to focus on the air side is air is not dry. It has both the regular your oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, argon. That is the dry component, and you have the water vapor. So people actually knew how to make refrigerators, but it took slightly more time for us to use it for the air conditioning application because we were finding it difficult to control the moisture component in here. That is why we have started separating these two components while we are studying or while we are discussing in the field also. We do not call an air conditioner as a refrigeration system, but technically they are same. It is just that the air conditioning unit would focus more on controlling the relative humidity component of the air or absolute humidity, whereas a refrigerator will just focus on whatever the medium it has to cool. A refrigerator can cool water, it can cool air, it can cool any other fluid. Think of your processing plants, let's say where your packaged juice is produced. Okay, so there are a lot of temperature control over there. Think about pasteurization of your milk. Okay, you have to rapidly heat and cool in order to kill the bacteria. So there you are not focusing on air. You still have a refrigeration system which cools the milk rapidly. Okay, but the medium which has to be cooled is now milk. So your refrigeration system is still the same as it is for the domestic refrigerator as it is for the air conditioning unit. It is just now the external medium has changed. The internal medium, which is the refrigerant, is still the same. So a refrigeration system, you can say, is a superset, whereas an air conditioning system is just a subset of the refrigeration system. So it is just one of the application of refrigeration. Okay, so what I will do is, I think my screen is not visible, no? Okay. My screen is visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so my office is in the RAC lab first floor. So when the things are better and you have access to the academic zone, and in case you want to visit the lab, or you can drop an email and visit my office. So the lab is on the ground floor and I sit on the first floor of the RAC lab. So I'll just quickly go through the course content. So as a part of RAC, what we would be discussing is the vapor compression refrigeration. That would be our primary point of discussion, and it is nothing but the reverse Rankine cycle. I hope everyone has gone through the gas cycles and the vapor cycles in thermodynamics. Cycles you have studied in thermodynamics? Rankine cycle, Brayton cycle, remember? Or does these names
Yes, sir.
ring a bell? Okay, okay. So it would be good that if you can just browse through that part of your thermodynamics, you can pick up any book on thermodynamics and just go through that chapter once, just to recollect the cycles. Because these cycles have specific name based on the inventor, and people get confused a bit. But anyway, we would be primarily discussing reverse Rankine cycle, so it won't be very tricky for you to remember that. We will look at the TS diagram, pH diagram, so pressure enthalpy, diagram of the ideal cycle. We will look at some modification. This modification is actually present in one of the lab setups also. So we will discuss that what is this heat exchanger and why it is placed, and what is the benefit or what is the demerit of placing this heat exchanger. We would discuss about what I was just discussing is the external regime and how external regime, that is whatever fluid you are cooling, or you could in fact use a refrigeration system for freezing also. That is what we use. We want to freeze. So based on the external regime, how the refrigeration system's performance can be affected. We will also look at the internal part, how the pressure drops and how the pipings and all in the refrigeration loop itself can affect the actual performance of a VCRS. So VCRS is a short form, an acronym for vapor compression refrigeration system. Okay. Then we will just briefly look at systems which do not use this cycle, but they are common in not in the sense of domestic usage, but they are quite common either in industry or common in a very specific field. So one example is the reverse Brayton cycle. This is of course the reverse of your Brayton power cycle. This refrigeration cycle is used in your aeroplanes. Okay, the air conditioner over there is completely different from the air conditioning system that we use on ground. So that's why we need some discussion on that. And there is something called the Stirling cycle, which finds application in cryogenic industry. So industry where we are looking at temperatures well below -100. Okay, let's say you have to transport natural gas from the source of production to the point of consumption, and you cannot bring it in form of gaseous state because it will occupy large volume, and we normally bring them via ship. So it will you can see that one ship will carry only few kgs of natural gas. So we liquefy that natural gas, and in order to liquefy that we have to reach temperatures of the order of -150. So after reaching that we have to maintain that. Okay, so these reverse Stirling cycles, they are not very good at lowering down the temperatures to -150. They are not very efficient, I would say, but they are quite good in sustaining the temperature. So because they are very compact, they do not occupy a lot of space, and once you attain -150, in order to maintain that, so these cycles are used on board on the ships. Okay, whereas there are slightly modified cycles of VCRS which are used to attain -150. Okay, it could be multiple staging of these cycles, or it could be using slightly modified version of the VCRS cycle to attain -150. Once you liquefy, now you have to transport this liquefied gas to several thousand kilometers away from the source of production. Now, in order to maintain that, we use reverse Stirling cycles. So these are very niche area where these different cycles have found their application. Then we would look at the refrigerants and their characteristics. Here we will discuss what are the desirable characteristics for any fluid to be used as a refrigerant. So theoretically, you can use any fluid which is available to you as a refrigerant. It is just that you will have to look at the suitability of that fluid for your given operating conditions. Can that be used as a refrigerant or not? Nowadays, you would be able to see that you are mainly limited by the availability of the components. So as I told you, theoretically on paper, if you have to do any kind of calculation or simulation, you can use any fluid available. But then when you go into the market and look for a compressor, you will not find a compressor for a particular fluid. So then you will have to revert back to those fluids only for which compressors are available. So that is one way. Or the other way is you can think of a revolutionary cycle which works with a particular fluid, gives you very good efficiency, and in case you are able to drive the market into that direction, then of course there would be manufacturers for your particular manufacturers of compressors for your particular fluid. So that is also possible. But that, since this is not a software industry, this is a hardcore mechanical engineering industry, takes a lot of time. So as we have progressed with newer and newer refrigerants, the compressor industry also has adapted to that. Okay, so the compressor which is used for the older R12 gases are not the same as the newer R32 gases. The operating pressures are completely different. So the compressor industry has also adapted based on the demand side. But the progress in the hardcore mechanical engineering is not in terms of few months or years. It could be a decade also in order to adapt the entire industry and or convert the entire industry to another refrigerant. So that is one of the biggest challenge in our field. So this is not a fast moving commodity. So naturally, after discussing about the refrigerants, we will look at the various types of compressors. Few compressors are available in our lab. So you will see there is a continuous sync with what we study in the theory part as well as what we would look at in the online lab class. Then we would primarily focus on the reciprocating compressor, mainly because it is easy to understand in a classroom environment, the mathematics of it. All the other types of compressors require a lot of simulation, CFD simulation, and the calculations are not amenable to simple 1D hand calculations. So, but as we will study about the reciprocating compressor, you will get a feel for the other compressors like scroll compressor or screw compressor. The fundamental is very same. It's just that the geometries are so difficult to evaluate. We cannot study it in a classroom environment. One needs to have a simulation software in order to study them. Okay, and the third part would be discussion on the expansion valves. So we will discuss the cycle and we will see what this expansion valve is. Then we will move on to the air conditioning part, and as I told you, air conditioning, we will not discuss about the refrigeration part, because once you are into the air conditioning part, it is just an application of refrigeration. So we will forget about the refrigeration part and we will just focus on the air part. So we'll discuss about the properties of moist air, psychrometry, how summer and winter air conditioning systems are there, and if time permits, we will discuss something on the thermal comfort and cooling load. Normally, we do not have much time in this course because it is a very compact one. So I may have to drop this part. Okay, but you have electives next year, and you can take up the individual refrigeration systems course or the air conditioning systems course in order to focus on one of these two, in case you are enthusiastic about them. Okay, and we will discuss one non-conventional refrigeration system. Again, this, if the time permits, that is the water lithium bromide system. My PhD was on a vapor adsorption system where I used water plus silica gel. How many of you know silica gel? Have you heard this term?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I used water as a refrigerant and silica gel as, here lithium bromide is a salt. So silica gel is one of the material has affinity to water vapor. So we can in fact use different methods also to produce refrigeration. It need not always comprise of a compressor which is compressing the gas and then helping you with the entire cycle. Okay, so you still have the other three components, that is the heat rejection, the heat absorption, and the expansion part. It is the compressor which we can replace it with some sort of a novelty which will remove the requirement of using electrical energy for the compression. So what is the novelty of this system is they do not, or they require very small amount of electrical power. They require heat. Okay, and that heat can come either from the waste heat from several industries, mainly the steel power plant or the concrete or the cement production plants. So you would see that these systems find application in the industry. Okay, or the heat could be from solar heat also. So there are a lot of startups now, in fact, not only in India but abroad, which are working on these systems using either biomass or agro waste to produce the heat required for driving these systems. So in one case, you are using the biomass available to generate something useful, the usefulness being producing, let's say, chilled water or chilled milk, or it could be just storing of the fruits and vegetables which a farmer is producing. The only lacuna or the issue with these systems and why they haven't found a lot of acceptability in the domestic environment is the size. These systems are very bulky, and hence it makes economic sense to make large systems of this nature compared to smaller ones. So it is just that these systems are bulky and hence the cost, the initial capital investment is very high. So they will not find application in smaller segments. So in case, let's say you have a village community which is primarily agro based and they have some demand of storing their produce, let's say for few weeks till they sell it in the market, and they have a lot of agro waste or bio waste. So how can we use this waste to drive the requirement being a cold storage unit? So this is where these non-conventional systems can find lot of usage. Okay, and they will require significantly less electrical energy compared to your domestic refrigerator. So you can also suggest why not just buy a 10 ton or a 20 ton refrigerator for them. So you will see that the electrical requirement is significantly high. So, and of course you will not be burning, you will again use the grid electricity. So why not use the waste that is produced in the community and use it for something useful? So this is where these new startups are coming. It is not that that they are a new technology. The technology has been existing parallelly with these conventional ones. So these technologies are also 100, 200 years old. It is just that they have not been pushed into the market as aggressively as the traditional ones. Then, okay, so let's look at the books. So there are 3 books. These are all reference books. So you will see that the course syllabus is not taken from any particular book. So I have mixed and matched. So you can follow my slides and you can also look at the books for in-depth reading. Okay, so Stoiker and Jones is a very classical book on refrigeration and air conditioning. You will find a lot of details. including the on-site what you can say the application part. It is not just the theoretical part that we are going to discuss. You will find a lot of application part and on-site case studies or the feedback from the people who have been using these systems. Only thing is it has not been updated for last how many years now? 40 years. Okay, so but still the basic idea is very well written in this book. We have two Indian author books also which are mentioned in this. Okay, so you can follow any of this book, and along with my course material, it should be enough. And we also have very good NPTEL lectures by Professor Ram Gopal. He's the other faculty in this field at IIT Kharagpur. So senior faculty, and you can look at his NPTEL lectures. Again, they are very nicely formulated, and you will find a lot of in-depth knowledge. So because that is around 40 or 50 hours lecture. So as far as the class timings go, I will be taking the Tuesday class, and Professor Dhananjay would be taking the Monday and Thursday class. There could be a swap based on our availability, but we will let you know in case there is a change. Okay. So, what is the difference between refrigeration and cooling? Can anyone tell me? We call that fluid as refrigerant and not as coolant. And there is a very small difference between a fluid being called as a coolant and a fluid being called as a refrigerant, or a
So
process
is
being
it,
called as cooling. Yes.
so is it that the refrigerant actually extracts heat and the other one cools it?
So cooling and refrigeration then same, no? So a coolant is also extracting heat.
Sir, a refrigerant will might take convert a normal temperature to below ambient temperature to below ambient temperature, while a coolant
Yes.
will convert higher than the ambient temperature to ambient temperature.
Good, very good. So the primary difference comes with respect to your ambient temperature. Okay, so if you are cooling, let's call it as cooling. If you are cooling any substance to a temperature below your ambient condition, then that process is called refrigeration. So if you are cooling water from 30 degree, let's say the ambient temperature right now is 20 degree in Kharagpur. So if you are cooling your 30 degree water to 25 degree, it is still cooling. But in case you go below 20 and you go to, let's say, 10 degree, then this process would come under the category of refrigeration. Okay. Now, why did we choose to give it a different name? This has an important connection to your thermodynamics. How many of you remember the two statements of second law of thermodynamics? Or at least the name of the scientists who gave them? Anyone who remembers? There were two distinct statements for the second law given by two different sets of scientists, but they amounted to the same meaning, but the statements were different. Anyone remembers? One was Kelvin Planck statement, the other one was Clausius statement. Does anyone remember?
Yes, sir. Coefficient of performance and efficiency of Carnot engine.
No, those statements were not related to a particular system performance. They related some particular aspect of the cycle. If you remember, Kelvin Planck's statement said that you cannot produce work from a source of heat without rejecting heat. basically the statement was verbatim, not this one, but if you have a source of heat and you want to produce work, you will also have to reject heat to another sink. Okay, you have Q heat in and you will have Q sink, and the difference would be the work. You cannot have Q sink going to 0. That was the statement of Kelvin Planck. What was the statement by Clausius? Anyone remembers? An equivalent statement was given by Clausius. It was just that the device he was describing was a different one. He was describing a heat pump. Acha, let me look at the motivation then. Can you go from 30 to 25 without any external input? Let's say you have a coffee mug which is at 30 degree and you don't do anything, it will go to 25. Is this statement correct when the ambient is 20?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can it go to 10
No, sir.
spontaneously?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
So what would be required there in order to make it go to 10?
Sir,
Work.
additional input, sir. Additional power.
Some external input has to be given. That was exactly what Clausius said. Okay, in case you want to pump heat, from a lower temperature reservoir, okay, let's say 10 to 30, you cannot do this spontaneously. You cannot transfer heat from a lower temperature to a higher temperature spontaneously. He did not say that it is impossible. Okay, he said that it is impossible without any external input. If you provide an external input, then this is possible. And that external input could be work input, or it can also be heat input. That is where the system, the water system that I was talking about, water lithium bromide. So these are systems which theoretically do not have any work input, they have heat input. So that is also possible. So you can have a solar heat driven refrigerator, okay, or you can have photovoltaic or electrical system, which is of course common to all our domestic refrigerators. So they are the same thing. So you can have work or heat input to a particular device which is pumping heat from 10 to 30. So in order to cool this coffee mug from 30 to 10, I will need something which absorbs heat. Okay, and if it is absorbing heat, then it also will be rejecting heat, and it can reject heat back to the ambient. That is the global sink that is available to us. Okay, so it has to absorb heat and then reject heat to the ambient. Now till 25 it is spontaneous, till 20 also, very close to 20 it would be spontaneous. As it comes closer and closer to 20, you would see that there is no more significant heat transfer. Now you will have to start pumping this heat from, let's say, 19.999, then 18, all the way till 10, and it has to be dumped back to 20. So you have to pump heat from a lower temperature reservoir to a higher temperature reservoir, and you require an external input for that. And hence, for this process to happen, we will not call it as cooling, because we associate cooling with a spontaneous process, and refrigeration is possible only if you have external input. So it is non-spontaneous, but it can be produced, of course. Okay, that's why we have given a different name for all the cooling processes which bring down the temperature of your system to sub-ambient temperature. And hence the ambient is always very, very important. Okay, so if I were to go to an ambient where minus 10 degrees C is the ambient temperature, then even at 10 degrees C, from 30 to 10, this is going to be a spontaneous process, and I can call it as a cooling, need not call it as refrigeration. If I go to Siberia, where the temperatures now could be minus 50, even temperatures of minus 30, I don't need a refrigerator. People over there, they use a refrigerator to produce heating and not cooling. So they will use the other way. Whatever whatever the outside unit you have in your refrigerator will go inside, and whatever inside unit will go outside. Okay, so you want to keep your vegetables at 5 degrees C when your ambient is at -50. Okay, it is still a refrigeration system. It is just that the indoor and the outdoor unit will have to be reversed. Or think of your room also. You want to still maintain, let's say 15 degree or 20 degree room temperature when your outdoor is at -50. Still the system is refrigeration system. It is just that imagine that the outdoor unit for your AC has become the indoor one, and the indoor unit has become the outdoor. That's it. Any doubts? So our refrigeration system, we think, is only there to produce cooling or refrigeration, but it is actually doing both together. It is producing refrigeration at one end and it is producing heating at the other end. So a refrigeration unit can be used for heating also. Okay, I don't know if you have actually looked or bought an AC recently, but you will see that nowadays companies are selling something as hot and cold AC. So an AC which can be used in hot summer and cold winter also. It is precisely doing what I was telling. So there is a reversal valve which just reverses the flow of the refrigerant when you want it to produce heating. So your indoor unit becomes outdoor unit and the outdoor becomes indoor. That is what it does, just by the presence of one reversal valve in the system. And they are not very expensive. So in case you are living in extreme climates, like Delhi, Rajasthan, where the temperatures between winter and summer could swing from what -5 or 0 to -5 in certain places in Rajasthan. That is what I was seeing in the news, and to +45 in the summer. So that is where these systems can actually be used. But we are so used to this word cooling. Okay, you will actually see me also calling many a times the refrigeration as cooling, a cooling produced in the indoor unit or cooling produced in the freezer section. So we are very used to using this word cooling, and we sometimes use it synonymously with refrigeration. Okay, in case I make that mistake, please bear with me. So this is what happens when we not only discuss technical things, but we also have to talk to the people, layman people who are not so accustomed to these technical words. So we use cooling, we use refrigeration synonymously. Okay, but you guys can understand that I am discussing only about the refrigeration. Sometimes we will call it as cooling capacity, the capacity that is written on your AC, 1.5 ton, 1 ton. So it is actually theoretically it should be refrigeration capacity. Okay, but we call it as cooling capacity. So as I was telling you, refrigeration systems have huge amount of applications, and air conditioning is just one such application. Okay, you have food preservation. We have lot of not only food preservation but also processing. Okay, so in order to produce a Coca-Cola drink or your fruity juice, it undergoes lot of processing, and processing means it is not just the chemical processing, it is also the temperatures which are changed. Okay, think of, as I told you, always think of the pasteurization of milk. Milk before pasteurization and after pasteurization is same, it is just that we kill the bacteria by taking it through this rapid heating and cooling process. Okay, so all the food processing industry, they use these refrigeration systems day in day out, and their primary power consumption happens in these chiller plants, chiller as well as heating plants. Okay, of course, as I told you, air conditioning is one of the application. You have the chemical industries, also could be the cracking or the petroleum industries. They also use refrigeration systems, okay, in order to separate out the various components of petroleum. Okay, how we are able to transport the natural gases requires refrigeration. Pharmaceutical industries, again, one of the largest client of refrigeration system. Okay, and this is the new area where refrigeration systems are finding huge amount of application is data center cooling. The more cloud computing we do, more is the demand on this data center cooling. People using Netflix, Hotstar, Sony Live, they don't know the amount of server racks that are present in the backend to provide you those services. People using the Amazon's AWS services. Okay, Amazon is the behemoth in data center now. They are actually providing all the backend servers to these OTT companies, be it Netflix, be it Hotstar, whatever. And how are they able to cool their massive server racks? Again, you require a refrigeration unit. You have a supercomputer in our campus. We have a dedicated chiller plant for that. Okay, so if the chiller plant trips, the supercomputer also trips. So this is again in no way an exhaustive list. People are now thinking of using these systems for atmospheric water harvesting. Places where you have a lot of humidity, you can pass the air through a chiller unit and get drinking water from the air itself. Of course, it is going to consume a lot of energy. That is besides the point, but you can use these processes to extract water. Okay, in fact, in desalination also refrigeration systems are finding application. Desalination application means if you have to obtain drinking water from seawater, okay, you heat and condense, and during the condensation part, if you are using refrigeration system, you can have multi-stage of desalination. We'll not be able to discuss this in class, but just telling you that there are other niche areas where refrigeration systems are finding application, which we do not discuss in a UG classroom environment. So just a quick trip down the memory lane and the historical background of how the refrigeration industry has developed. So initially we only knew how to produce natural refrigeration. So what is that? You take ice from colder region to the hotter region. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie, Kingdom of Heaven. Has anyone seen that? Kingdom of Heaven. So anyway, so in that movie they show that I think the story is all about the religious war in Jerusalem. So there, one of the king offers the other king ice in summer. Okay, so that is a very expensive offer. So that ice has been transported all the way from Europe to the present Israel, and one king is offering it to others. So only the kings and prince can afford to have such facilities. So you have to store ice, you have to transport ice. Okay, so, or it could be stored ice during winter, which is produced in winter and consumed in summer. So it could be done probably let's say in the hilly regions where you have sufficient snowfall, you store the ice in big insulated rooms and use it in the summer. So we are not able to actively ice. So that was way back, way back in 17th and 18th century. Then with little more understanding of physical processes which were happening in nature, we started producing our own ice by something called as the nocturnal cooling. And this was very, very common in the central part of India. People in the UP and MP, they can appreciate that at night, even during summer at night, the temperatures could go anywhere between 10 to 15 degree below the peak temperature. Let's say at summer afternoon you can have 40, 45, and at night you can have 25 to 30 also. That could be the swing. And during those days we didn't have pollution. Okay, and central region of our country does not receive lot of rainfall, so you have clear skies. And you can set up something of this sort. So you can make a ditch, you can put some kind of an insulating material. Of course, people only knew about the hay and soil and whatever naturally occurring insulating medium was available in that time. Okay, and collect water in that. Okay, and if you have clear sky during night, so you can actually lose heat from this water because of radiation. Radiation between this water surface and the stratosphere. Nowadays, you can not actually see the stratosphere because of cloud coverage and dust coverage, mainly dust coverage. So you can actually have heat transfer at night with the stratosphere by means of radiation. And maybe after a couple of weeks or so of exposing this water to the night sky and then again closing it during the day in order to maintain the temperature, people were able to produce ice. So that was the first active production of ice by passive means. Still, we are not using any equipment, any external or manual input. Okay. And in fact, India was one of the pioneering nation in this technology. The other was evaporative cooling. It should not be technically a part of refrigeration, but people were still able to produce lower temperatures compared to ambient using the evaporative cooling. Evaporative cooling is what we nowadays use in our desert coolers or your earthen pots. Okay, so on a large scale, again, this was primarily used in the Middle Eastern countries where people had built walls out of clay, and the clay was used for producing the evaporative cooling. Okay, then all people also realized that we can dissolve some kind of salts in water and they create some endothermic reaction, and you can bring down the temperature to below the ambient. So as we started developing our understanding of science, we started progressing in this field also. So main limitations of using these natural means was, of course, they are not reliable. You are dependent on the nature. Difficult to produce in very large amount, not available to everybody. So only a prince or a king can afford to transport ice from the Alps to the Middle East. Okay, so the development of refrigeration went hand in hand with the development of thermodynamics. Okay, so all the eminent scientists, that is Carnot, Rankine, Clausius. So as they were progressing with their understanding of thermodynamics, refrigeration also was developing. Because thermodynamics, even though we study it as if it is a precursor to the applied field, it actually came after people started realizing the necessity of refrigeration and power production. So people first thought about the application, so how to create motion, how to produce temperatures below the ambient. That was the idea. And then people realized, oh, what is the physics behind it? Why we are not able to produce active motion, or why we are not able to spontaneously produce refrigeration. Okay, and that is when the theory started coming up. So we teach you thermodynamics in second year, but people actually had the notion of producing refrigeration or producing motion first, and then came the theory behind it. Similarly, we teach you second law after first law, but people had the notion of second law first. Anything being conserved is a very difficult concept. Even though we go through a formal school education where we are taught that energy is conserved, but think of an example where you ask a kid that I drop a tennis ball from a particular height, it will bounce back to the same height. Think that that kid is in class 5 or 6, he has no understanding of energy conservation, but he will laugh at you, isn't it? So he will think that how come it will come back to the same height, because from his notion he will always think that he has never seen something being conserved. He will think it will come back to a certain height and then again drop back, and finally the energy would be lost, and he would think that you are a mad person who is claiming that he'll come back to same height. But it is once we go to the formal education, it becomes so intuitive for us that we find second law very difficult. But for people in those days, second law was more. So the first artificial refrigeration, or you can call it as active method of producing refrigeration, the first attempt was made by William Cullen, a physician, chemist, and agriculturist. Okay, and he produced ice by evaporating ether under vacuum. So people had this notion that when you evaporate or boil something, it absorbs heat from the surrounding. And if you use certain chemicals which are volatile in atmospheric condition, they can produce cooling. Just like acetone. If you drop few drops of acetone, you will feel that the hand has become cooler. Do not do this because acetone is quite corrosive for hand. Okay. Similarly, any volatile organic compound, you pour it in a glass, touch the glass, you will feel it's quite cold. Okay, and people also had this notion that if you reduce the pressure, the boiling point can be reduced. And now we study this as a part of our thermodynamics, properties of fluids, properties of pure substance, that pressure and temperature, how they are linked. So they already had that notion that if you reduce the pressure, the boiling point also reduces. So this person, he was the first person who can actually show it experimentally that I can produce refrigeration by reducing the pressure of any particular fluid, and the fluid that he used was ether. Okay, and slowly people picked up from this, and it was around 1805 where Oliver Evans, another scientist, he actually described a closed cycle, but he could not build that cycle. It was in 1835 when Jacob Perkins, he built this system, and this system was shown in, I think it is still there in London. Okay, this is the first refrigeration cycle which worked as a cycle. Okay, so in 1755, only the principle of the evaporation was shown, but you have to then compress the evaporated gases, then condense this, and then expand it, and then again push it back to the evaporator. So this entire cycle had to be closed. So this closed cycle, this entire system was first made by Jacob Perkins in 1835. Okay, even now people did not have any formal first law, okay, or a second law statement of that sort. Okay, people were parallelly working on those things, but the system which used those laws was already in place. Okay, so do not just think that we teach you in a particular order. Things have actually chronologically happened in the same order. So they have happened either parallelly or in other sequences. So this is the patent. This is the drawing from his patent. Okay, and hence sometimes the present day refrigeration cycles are called Evans-Perkins cycles in order to honor these two scientists. So in this patent, you can see there is one bellow, okay, one bellow. This is the refrigerant. Whatever is inside this bellow is the refrigerant. Then you have some kind of a hand pump arrangement. Okay, so this was manually operated. So this hand pump could be connected to a wheel, and you rotate the wheel and you will have the motion of this piston going up and down. So basically this is a compressor. So so this is the water. It is kept in an external chamber, so or a bucket. So this is that. Okay, this is the container where your refrigerant is. Okay, and basically this is a bellow. So as you move the hand pump, the bellow can compress and expand. So what it is doing is it is sucking in vapor. So as it sucks in vapor, the pressure inside this bellow goes down, and hence the boiling point of the refrigerant. Okay, and it takes up heat from all this surrounding. The surrounding being, it could be water or it could be any fluid kept in this bucket. So this vapor was compressed and then it went to the other bucket. So the other bucket will have another fluid. So again it would be water, and this water will get warmer. And as it gets warmer, basically it is absorbing heat which is lost by this vapor. So this vapor loses heat and condenses, and this condensed liquid goes into this valve. This is a valve. Okay, and this valve opens at a certain differential pressure. So when the pressure, condenser and evaporator, when the difference goes beyond a certain limit, there is a weight over here that lifts up, and it allows the flow of liquid into this bell. So this was the entire cycle. Until today also we are using the same number of components, that is 4. You will have a place where you are generating cooling or refrigeration. So that is called the evaporator, because refrigerant is boiling over there. The second one is the compressor. The third one is the condenser, where the refrigerant condenses. And the fourth one is the expansion valve. So these are the 4 components in his patent. Until today, be it your AC, be it your refrigerator, every domestic refrigeration system uses these 4 components. Now, parallelly, as I was telling you, it was not the only technology by which refrigeration can be produced. Parallelly, there were other people who were devising systems which can produce refrigeration without the use of a compressor. See, using a compressor is very easy for us now because we have electrical energy available everywhere. There was no electricity back then. So this hand pump was a manually operated one. How long will you operate? You will use some animal to operate it for a longer duration. So as soon as someone gets tired, this system will stop. So that's why people were thinking that why not have something which is easily available to drive the refrigeration system, that is heat. You can continuously burn coal, or you can continuously burn any particular natural cellulose like wood. So back then, burning and getting the heating or getting the thermal energy was a much more easier affair. And that's why there was a parallel technology today as the so this was the rivaling technology. So what people were using was certain substances have affinity for some other fluid. So as I was telling you, I use silica gel in my PhD. So silica gel has affinity to water. Where have you seen this silica gel? People who claim
Water
that they
bottles,
have heard this one.
water bottles,
Water
and
bottle,
bags.
shoe box,
New shoes.
shoe box, yes, yes, new shoes, yes. Anything which is made of leather and it comes in a packaging, you will see those tiny sachet of silica gel present in that. So that is because silica gel has affinity to water vapor. So how do we use that for producing refrigeration? Okay. So people started first with having sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid also has affinity to water. Okay, then later on it was found that you can have some salts, even NaCl, the common salt that you use, also has affinity to water vapor. In rainy season, you will see those salt bottles, if they are open to atmosphere, they become like mushy. They become almost like semi-liquid because water vapor gets absorbed in the NaCl and it forms that jelly structure or semi-solid kind of a structure. So how do we use that to produce refrigeration? I'll just tell you the principle quickly. So let's say you have water, pure water, no air inside this container. Let's say you have a valve over here. Okay, another container containing that particular substance which has affinity to water vapor. Okay, let's keep this in one bucket, keep the other one in another bucket. We will see why this bucket has to be there. So if I open this valve, this is water, and let's call this as silica gel. So water vapor will gush into this container which has silica gel. What will happen to the pressure of liquid water? As water vapor gushes into this container, what will happen to the pressure above this liquid column? So you have one container having liquid plus vapor, the other container has silica gel completely packed, assume completely packed. And there is a valve, I open this valve and I tell you that silica gel has affinity to water vapor. So as I open this valve, water vapor will gush into this silica gel and get absorbed in it. Then what happens to the pressure above liquid column?
Decreases.
Down, this liquid water will then tend to boil. Okay, so liquid water will go into the vapor state and it will go back into this container which contains silica gel. So this will happen till this entire silica gel gets saturated with water vapor. Now as the boiling happens in this container, from where will it get the heat? It will get the heat from itself, as well as if it is contained within a bucket and if the outside of this bucket also has some water, so it will pick up heat from this water. So you can produce refrigeration over here. The idea remains very similar to the previous one. You still have to vaporize something which reduces the temperature and it absorbs heat from the surrounding. Now when this water vapor enters into the silica gel and it gets absorbed, it produces heat. So that is an exothermic reaction, and hence we will need some coolant over here to take away this heat. It can be again water itself. So you still have those two buckets. Now once this silica gel gets saturated, now water vapor will not gush into this silica gel container. It will remain as it is. So now you will have an equilibrium. So this is not a cycle, this is just one process. So how do we create a cycle is, then in another case what we do is we start heating this bucket to supply heat. So as you heat this heat gets transferred to the silica gel, then the water vapor which was absorbed starts desorbing, and it desorbs and it goes back into this container and starts condensing in this, and it will release heat back into this fluid. So you continue to do this till your entire vapor which was present in the silica gel goes back into this container. So of course, if you just use these two containers, in one case you will produce refrigeration, the other case you will be producing heating, because this water vapor will come back into this container, condense and release the heat back into the same fluid which you had cooled. So you will have no net refrigeration, but the idea is now clear. The idea is you can adsorb and desorb and produce refrigeration. Okay, so this is what the scientists back then realized, and they were able to come up with a cycle which is similar to this. Okay, the first refrigerator based on this principle which was patented is named after Ferdinand Carré. Okay, and nowadays these systems are actually available. Typically the size of these systems would be of the order of few hundred kilowatt. So that is the amount of refrigeration they are producing. Okay, compare that to your refrigerator at home, which will produce about 150 to 200 watts maximum, unless you have those Almira sized refrigerators, which will probably produce of the order of 500, 600 watts. The air conditioning unit is producing 5 kilowatts if you have a 1.5 ton AC. And these systems, they normally start at 100 kilowatt if you want to buy them. And they require huge amount of heat. In order to system of this nature, you probably will require 150 kilowatt to 200 kilowatt of heat. So this technology existed in parallel. It is just that it was catering to a different, or it has been catering to a different kind of client. Okay, and the need for them was, there was no electricity available, whereas they were able to burn fuel and get the heat. So that was the need which drove this technology. And now the need is to use the waste heat and recover as much as possible before dumping it into the ambient. So that is what is driving this market now. Okay, so initially the domestic refrigerators were just an ice box. So it is just an insulation box. You will have to buy ice commercially. Now this commercial ice could be produced by the vapor compression systems which were available on a larger scale. See, things in mechanical industries are much more easier to build on a larger scale initially before miniaturizing them. Okay, larger scale, I'm not talking about hundreds of kilowatts, but few kilowatts, it was easier for people to build. It took some time for people to miniaturize. Mainly the compressor technology had to pick up. So you have to buy the ice commercially and then store it in a box. That was the first refrigerator available in 1803. And after Jacob Perkins' patent, it took another 60-70 years for General Electric, Kelvinator, Frigidaire to come up with a commercial domestic refrigerator in the US market. Okay, and during those days, the refrigeration unit was very modular. So this entire unit housed the refrigeration unit. So in case something went wrong, you can replace this entire unit. So your evaporator coil was this. You had a condensing coil on top, and the compressor was also housed in this. So people took the idea of the insulation box and placed the entire refrigeration unit on top of this. Okay, and then later on, we realized that if you are able to reject heat well to the ambient, then your refrigeration capacity is better, your COPs are higher, and all those things. And then we started making those mesh kind of a thing, which you would have seen in the older refrigerator. So just for fun, I have included one of those ads that were available during those days. So think of 1900, 10, 1920. Refrigerator is still a very important device now, and during those days it was a wonder device. A device which could be used by the family to store so many things. So this is one of those ads given by GE. Okay, and if I look at the air conditioning system, so as the refrigeration system technology was developing, it had huge amount of application. People during that time also they realized that. So this air conditioning field also was developing in parallel with the refrigeration system. So the theoretical definition of air conditioning is any system which is able to control the temperature, relative humidity, velocity, the heat energy level, as well as filter the air. So air conditioning involves lot of processing of the air itself. Where people were finding it difficult was, of course, the temperature and the relative humidity. Control of these two simultaneously was the most challenging part. So the notion of air conditioning was present. It was just that people were not able to achieve that. Now this is where another American engineer named Willis Carrier, he came into picture, and it was not just the machine that he built, it was mainly the paper that he wrote, where he wrote about the psychrometric processes. So how the temperature and the humidity of air, how they are two connected, and how controlling one will change the other. Once this came into the open public, then people realized that just by controlling the temperature, especially in the cooling process or refrigeration process, just by controlling the amount of refrigeration and the temperature, you can actually control the humidity levels also. Okay, immediately after his paper was published, he was hired by a lithography and printing company. They were facing issues with their print quality, and they realized that the print quality was poor because the humidity in the within the press and within that room where they were doing this printing was not up to the required level. And once this paper was published, he was immediately hired as a consultant for making this first commercially operable air conditioner. And he formed this company called the Carrier Engineering Corporation. So he was initially hired as a consultant for this lithography and printing company, and then he built this device for them, which was able to control temperature and humidity together based on the theoretical work that he had done. And that's why he's called the father of air conditioning systems. And I'm sure you would have come across this company logo. This company still exists. Okay, and once this company was formed and he actually showed that you can control temperature and humidity of the ambient air together, he got huge number of clients, ranging from people building skyscrapers to even car manufacturers. Okay, many of you may not know that even during the car spray painting, the temperature and humidity of the ambient air has to be controlled in a very specific range. So very similar to the problem that this printing company was facing. So where is the scope of refrigeration and air conditioning in present day scenario? So I would look at two countries. Of course, one is India, the other one being the US. If you look at the energy consumption pattern of US, you see the amount of power they consume for space heating, water heating, space cooling, and refrigerators and freezers. So if you sum it up, you see in total you will be consuming what, 40, 50, more than 55% of energy is consumed just for the space conditioning and refrigeration. So air conditioning definition is not just always cooling and dehumidification. It is also heating. It is also filtering. Okay, all the associated property, the modifications that you do to the air goes into this air conditioning. So you can have heating, you can have humidification also. Okay, there are humidifiers available in the market, especially during dry winters. Many patients cannot tolerate the dry air which is available, so they can place a small humidifier in their room during the night. Okay, so we as an Indian customer, we always think air conditioners only do cooling and dehumidification, but it includes all the process: cooling, dehumidification, heating, humidification, filtration, okay, as well as controlling the air velocity. In fact, just using a blower or a fan in your room is also a part of air conditioning. It need not use the refrigeration system at all. So if you include all these things, in US the energy consumed by a common man is around 50 to 60% of the daily power consumption. Whereas if you look at the Indian data, even though this data is slightly old, you will see refrigerators are 14%, air conditioners are 4%. Electrical heating is done mainly for the geysers, okay, which we do not use a refrigeration system for. In fact, you can use a refrigeration system to heat water also, okay, and maybe air coolers. So still majority of it is dedicated for fan and refrigerator. We do not use refrigeration systems as such to produce this heating. And in fact, the air conditioner power consumed, which is 4% on an average, is growing at a rapid pace. Okay, our power consumption pattern is probably going to look like this in another 20-30 years. Okay, refrigeration industry is growing at a pace of 25 to 30% per annum. That's a huge compared to, let's say, our GDP, which is growing at 9 to 10%. So this is growing at a rapid pace. And we are fortunate enough that we are growing now where all the regulations and policies are in place. So we can grow at a sustainable or in a sustainable direction rather than using refrigerants which already US and European customers have used and destroyed the environment. We can actually go in a sustainable direction. So this is a rapidly growing field. It is just that people think that this is a saturated field and we do not pick up. But as far as capital investment goes, as far as the return on investment goes, the what you call as the profit is huge in this field, especially in a developing developing country like India or country like Brazil. In fact, the penetration, if I look at the penetration of refrigeration and air conditioning industry in US is around 90 to 95% of the people over there have an AC, whereas here the penetration is hardly 5 to 10%, which is quite evident from this pie chart. So think of the growth that is available in this industry and think of the opportunities with all the energy policies that are coming up. Okay, so we have scope for alternative means of refrigeration using renewables, using waste heat. We have scope with the new alternative refrigerants. Okay, people are working on using CO2 as refrigerant. In fact, we also have a couple of PhD students at IIT Kharagpur who are working on developing a CO2 based refrigeration systems. So we are fortunate in the sense that the penetration has just started happening when we are moving into a sustainable direction. So we can directly implement these technologies right away. We do not have to retrofit or remove the old systems and place the newer ones. Okay, so this is where I will stop today's class. Any questions, any doubts, I will take up now.